Well, Xstrata may well be an emissions-intensive, trade-exposed industry. The problem, though, is that under the Rudd government's legislation, Xstrata and other coal producers are not considered worthy of any rebates or free permits. Confused? Well, the Coalition says the Prime Minister certainly is about his own emissions trading legislation. Joining me now is the Shadow Minister responsible for emissions trading, Andrew Robb. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, David.
Let me first try and clear up what the Coalition's position now is on climate change. Do you accept that the cost of doing nothing is greater than the cost of taking action?
Well, no, our view is that if you bring in a deeply flawed scheme, it's worse than no scheme at all. The thing is, you've got to get this thing right. We came to the last election with a detailed emissions trading scheme, and we've said ever since that we will review that policy, that scheme, which remains our policy, but we're reviewing it in the light of what the government does. It's green paper, it's white paper, it's exposure draft, the Garneau report, an independent review that we've had commissioned ourselves. Now we've got a 2-month Senate inquiry, which is broad-ranging, for the first time looking at lots of issues that haven't been looked at all. We will take all of that into account in reviewing the policy we put to the last election, and we'll put a firm position in front of the Australian people.
But the policy you put at the last election was for an emissions trading scheme. Do you still think, even if it's the scheme that you wanted, it is better than doing nothing?
Well, it depends on the scheme. A deeply flawed scheme, if you take what the government has put together, our examination of that now over several months is that it would cost tens of thousands of jobs, it would kill investment, and it won't deliver any CO2 reduction of any consequence. So it sort of fails on all counts. Kevin Rudd went to the last election and many times said before the election, we will bring in a scheme which delivers deep cuts in carbon emissions and will not disadvantage any of our export industries or import competing industries. Now, their scheme fails on all counts. It is worse than no scheme at all, their scheme, and it will not get the support if they don't make major changes.
But the Coalition does appear to have changed its position on this as well. Only last year, Malcolm Turnbull was describing an emissions trading scheme as being a central mechanism, the biggest element in the fight against climate change. He's now saying it's not an essential tool, not a necessary tool. Why the change?
Well, what we have said is that an emissions trading scheme is one tool in the climate change toolbox. There are many other elements. As we've looked through the Garneau report and our own investigations and further developments in this whole area around the world, clearly there are a range of tools that need to be used. The government has, because it has focused singularly on one thing, an emissions trading scheme, to the exclusion of all the other tools in the climate change toolbox, they have come up with a dog of a scheme. They've come up with a scheme that will cost tens of thousands of jobs if implemented. It'll come up with a scheme which will kill investment. There will not be a project in Australia in the future that won't get off the ground without companies coming cap in hand to get big slabs of free permits. Now, that will kill a lot of investment. And the thing is, they won't do anything of any consequence about CO2 emissions. It is just a failure on all counts.
Could I just clear up? Would the Coalition still take action regardless of what the rest of the world is doing on climate change?
Well, already. I mean, Malcolm Turnbull had a major speech in January the 24th, where he laid out a whole host of other areas to do with soil carbon, capturing a lot of CO2, enormous scope for capturing.
But on an emissions trading scheme specifically, this was the position that you would take action without the rest of the world.
David, the objective is to reduce the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's the objective. One thing you can do is reduce the emissions. Another thing you can do is capture more carbon in soil. You can reduce energy efficiency, improve energy efficiency, reduce energy requirements across the whole built environment, all of our commercial buildings. There is enormous scope to reach targets in the next 10, 15, 20 years, at least what the government are doing, even before you get to an ETS, right? So an ETS or some system of setting a price ultimately is necessary.
Yeah,
but there are many alternatives the government hasn't looked at on all these fronts.
But again, last year your position was that an ETS is necessary and Australia should do it regardless of what the rest of the world does. Now it sounds like you're saying it's only a tool in the box, it's not necessary.
Our position is that we must do everything possible to reduce the concentrations of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The scheme the government has come up with will be ineffectual.
It's your own
but it will, and it will also. This is the government. They've been elected to bring in a scheme. They've got a scheme on the books which is going to be voted on in 2 or 3 months' time. The critical thing is to look at what are they proposing to do and how effective is it, and are there better alternatives. We, as an opposition, seeking to keep the government accountable, have already identified a whole range of alternatives, and we've looked at their emissions trading scheme, and it is a dog. It is not going to deliver. We want, with this Senate inquiry, to look more broadly at alternatives. There are alternative emissions trading schemes. In North America there are emissions trading schemes which don't kill the balance sheet of companies, which have a marked impact on CO2 emissions without killing jobs. Now, that's the sort of focus the government needs. They have not consulted properly. They have been narrow-minded. They've been arrogant about the way they've gone about this whole scheme, and the Australian community will pay very dearly. We saw it with the Prime Minister's comments today.
All right, I'm still just trying to clarify whether you have